Hello, eCommerce listeners, and welcome to another episode of our show. I'm so excited to host Yoni Kosminski today, co-founder of MultiplyMii and Escala, a serial bootstrap entrepreneur. Yoni, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Eitan, it's a pleasure to be here. Excited to sit down and chat.
Yes, you're one of my guests that I have like a million topics to discuss with you. You've done so much, both as an entrepreneur, but also in the business, and definitely in the business of marketing and e-commerce. And tell us about MultiplyMii and Scala. What do you do these days?
For sure, yeah. We can definitely take it to a whole range of topics. But as it relates to MultiplyMii and Scala, MultiplyMii, we're an end-to-end executive search recruitment firm focused on really being an HR business partner for people looking to build high-performing remote Filipino teams. Escala, on the other hand, is a process improvement management consultancy. So we took a team out of Ernst & Young in the Philippines where they were working on very Fortune 500 companies, building SOPs, process documentation, accountability and org charts, those things. And we really wanted to make it accessible for e-commerce businesses, US-based brands, and companies that were looking to scale but couldn't afford the very high ticket price tag. So effectively together, they work very closely with one another where we're helping businesses really understand how do they build commercial scale and profitability into their business.
Interesting. So what inspired you to launch these businesses?
Well, I'd have to go all the way back to the start of my career. I spent 10 years in creative advertising and digital marketing strategy in Australia, and then in the US working with small agencies, anywhere from, let's say, 15 employees to 40 employees across the agencies I worked with, but with big name household brands like Sony, Mercedes-Benz, Medtronic. And so I always had sort of the vantage point of seeing what it was to work in a small business, but what it was to work with a big corporate. And when I came to Israel a little over 7 years ago, I met a couple of guys that had an e-commerce business that was doing about 2 million in revenue, and realized that while they were incredible founders and very good at picking products, they weren't building a sustainable system that actually could produce the volume of work required in a really meaningful way. And so effectively built an agency for that company with my co-founder. We built a customer support function. We had designers, project managers, operations managers, video production specialists. We built sort of the works out, and that company grew from 2 to 5 million in about 12 months. It was acquired. And on that journey, all the talent that we had hired were from the Philippines. And having worked with such big clients and worked, I would say at a pretty meaningful sort of size and stage of the creative advertising, digital marketing space, I realized that this was something that could really have material impact. So that was sort of let's call it the brainchild and the testing ground, where we said we could really help a lot of other brands do this. And that was where the idea came from. And that's really become like a really driving and meaningful passion, both to help companies grow and do it profitably, but also, I don't know how much experience you've had with Filipinos. I know we touched on it in previous conversations, and you do have experience, but for people listening, I've fallen in love with the culture as well. And so that's a really beautiful thing, knowing that we can support an incredible culture and provide value to the clients that we're serving too.
Yes, we are in an era of like increased focus on operational excellence and profitability and kind of the fractional everything era, right? So both on the executive level, but also on the various job functions that are becoming more and more specialized, right, on different tasks and different communities. Tell us more about this Filipino culture and why you choose this place and what type of capabilities or functions that you have there that can help, businesses, definitely brands and businesses in the US.
Absolutely. Before I share about the Philippines, you touched on something that I think is really interesting when it comes to both a topic of conversation, but a topic of consideration when you are building a business. You talked about sort of I don't know, I can't exactly remember the direct quote, but it's like the rise of fractional resources. You see a lot of fractional CMO and COO and integrated solutions, and there's become like a really big push for that. And where I see a lot of value in that, and we have also been leveraging it. I think one of the interesting things as you become sort of a business of material substance is that the needs that you have will soon sort of outgrow that fractional resource, or the costs attached to them. They might be $3, $4, $5, $10,000 a month. They are sort of the strategy mindset thinking and developing. But if you have them working on sort of the executional task work, you're not really building the right leveraged ratios. So coming back to your question about the Philippines, I would say, and I can share a lot of the mistakes that I've made throughout my journey. I would say, for those listening, we grew from, a team of me and my co-founder to 120 people in about 18 months, where there was 2 of us and 118 people in the Philippines. Today, we're closer to about 80 people or 90 people, let's say, in the Philippines. And we have a larger footprint here, both in Israel, Australia, and the US than we did back then. And we have a smaller footprint in the Philippines. And what we did was we over-indexed and said, you know what, every single person that sits in a Western geography can be replaced by someone in the Philippines. And, I would say I learned the hard way what we would define it as like operational debt. We went too far into one direction. So it's about finding that mix. So coming back to it, you find incredible talent in the Philippines for a whole variety of roles. The areas that I'm very familiar with is everything from, graphic designers, video production specialists, appointment setters, customer support functions, project managers, operations managers, accountants, accounts payable, receivable. The list goes on. It's quite expansive, but that is to say that where you're going to get the most utility, where you're going to see the most value in bringing in some really high caliber talent is by also making sure that you have some strategic minds, or you have either that fractional resource that's helping build the strategy, or I would say better yet, if you can afford to have someone like that in-house and connecting all of the pieces. So having a CMO, a COO, a CFO, all your C-suite can live in sort of, your either local geography or a Western geography, depending on where you sit in the business. I think you're going to see your business succeed far more in giving them, and I'm not talking about executional tasks here. Like don't misconstrue what I'm saying in thinking that what I'm saying is you get someone who can do like a task list. You can get some really high quality designers. I would invite anyone listening to look at any of our websites. Everything that's produced there is Filipino content writers. My Webflow developer is out of the Philippines as well, full-time in-house. My designers, like they're all my in-house team, but I build the strategy, and I really help to articulate, but they build my brand book and guidelines. Like it's about building the right ratios is really the point that I'm laboring here.
Nice. So you've been doing this for quite a while and quite successfully. You placed more than 1,000 employees already. What's for you is an ideal setup for a US brand, for example, in terms of hiring versus outsource? Let's try to define the company and its major functions. And what is your recommendation for a best practice, maybe, if there is one?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say it comes down to a couple of things. I think there's 2 ways you can approach like delegation, or also, you sort of have to look at it holistically. So you have to look at, obviously, the most important thing is you need to look at what are your actual capabilities from an operating expenses perspective, and what can you afford to take on. So that's one component that you obviously need to consider. Can I afford to bring people on in-house? Do I have the skills and capabilities to bring them in-house? So when you talk about, doing this from the standpoint of like outsourcing it, or, delegating it to a company where they're accountable and responsible, let's say that you have no experience in email marketing, hiring, a very low level copywriter who doesn't really understand the strategy behind it, but ultimately you bring them in, you say, you do my email marketing, that's, we're going to be okay. I think that's where you sort of need to make that clear distinction and say, do I have the skill sets and can I afford to bring them on? So, if you're outsourcing something entirely, so you're handing that function off, then, you have to know enough to be dangerous to ask the right questions. If you're going to build a remote team, then I would say you need to have a degree of understanding of like what it is you're building. And that's why, coming back to my previous point, that's why you want to have those strategic people who are sitting in house that can actually, I'm trying to think of the right terminology here, like having enough chefs to, your cook staff. You need to make sure that you're not trying to bring in too many of the people just, doing the legwork like we did. And as a result, we had functions that were so inefficient, and just like, things that I can say early on, I was not proud to put my name against. Not only was I not proud, I didn't even realize we were doing it because there were so many things that were being built in perpetuity. So
yeah.
I'm not sure if I answered your question, but if I didn't, then go again with
No,
another
I
ask.
think it makes a lot of sense. And sometimes, I mean, you don't know what you don't know, right? You think you're hiring this email marketing expert and you get what you get, but it can be like, 10 levels above in terms of the expertise and the professionalism. And no one is able, to make so many decisions about such, specific functionalities. And like in marketing, obviously there are so many tasks to do, and you have operation and you have product development and support and obviously data. So, and again, as we said, it's becoming more and more complex. Any of these areas, just work, with experts, right? To leverage knowledge that is available out there. So in a typical scenario, what are the challenges companies face when scaling remote teams, and how does MultiplyMii address them?
So the types of typical challenges that companies would have when it comes to actually scaling remote teams, I would say, is one, a lot of the time we sit and we look to sort of point the finger at the talent. We hired that person and they were shit. But in actuality, and I think this has taken me a long time to accept or even realize in myself, is that everything when it comes to business and in life in general, for me, comes down to planning. And so making sure that you're taking a really systematic approach to it. So where a lot of people fail is that they don't build a really clear picture of what success looks like at the starting point. When you're going to hire someone, onshore or offshore, you need to understand what success looks like when you bring this person on. How are they going to actually improve the position of the business or the business function or the role that they play inside of that function? What does success look like in the first point before you actually bring them in? And then once you get to that point, you make the deliberation and you have a really solid recruitment process where, for example, you build something like a scorecard where you have the desired mission of that role, the outcomes, and the attributions. What does this person need to actually be able to display in order to be successful? Making sure that you're measuring them against one another. So that's like the early stages. But I would say where people really start to go wrong, especially if they haven't had a lot of experience in an outsourced environment, is that there's plenty of books written on this topic, but onboarding is such a critical step in getting these things right. And so the first 90 days, which is the title of an incredible book, but also the most critical stages when it comes to when you go through your recruitment phase, is making sure that the person that you've selected understands where they sit, understands how they can get some quick wins with the projects that they run, and make sure that you're actually having like reoccurring touch points, knowing that you can't just tap them over the shoulder and say, hey, come here. I would say, back to the where do people go wrong? I think too many people, whether it's local or remote, will say, you know what, just come and shadow me. Watch what I do for the next couple of weeks, and then you'll get it. And with that kind of structure or lack of it, you're bound to not only go wrong, but what's more is that you are the bottleneck, and you will ultimately become frustrated in realizing that without you moving forward or coming into work, there's no way that this person can progress and achieve their sort of value proposition that they're looking to bring. So, I mean, I can go on and on. I'll maybe stop there because I feel like you might have some more questions here.
No, it's really interesting, obviously, and also the onboarding process, which you mentioned before, which is obviously something that I wanted to discuss again with you. Maybe you want to elaborate how is the typical process works.
Absolutely. So, I mean, you asked like, how does MultiplyMii support as well as the secondary part of the question. So, in our specific sort of delivery mechanism, obviously we understand that not everyone has a professional recruitment process, and what's more is that it's hard to find good talent. Period. You can obviously throw a job description up on a job board and sort of hope to get the outcomes that you want, but for us, we have a team of about 20 full-time dedicated recruiters, and we do a lot of what is defined as passive candidate searching. So we're looking to find people who have roles currently are employed, and we effectively like headhunt them to find good work. And because this is their daily existence, so for someone like you or me, we can step in and look to recruit. I'm actually going through this process now, looking for someone here in Israel to sit across my sales and marketing function. And I realized just the amount of time that I need to invest in going through, a rigorous process in identifying the right candidate, scheduling interviews, going through an assessment test, having a follow-up. Like, there's a lot of work that goes into finding that. So, coming back to it, that's what we do is we'll go through that process. You have a dedicated recruiter. We're giving you weekly updates. We look to whittle it down to a top 3. And only once we have a top 3, we'll then put it in front of the client, assuming that goes to plan. Then the next step for us is actually, that onboarding phase. So we build the onboarding plan. We work with the company to help, the new hire understand the culture, understand the systems and the technology that's being used, understand what the expectations are, and even work with them to build out things like performance management, understanding exactly what they need to do. And then when we bring Escala in from time to time, we'll also build out all of the process maps and standard operating procedures for functions so that it's very, very clear. Coming back to it, instead of having someone follow you around, all of a sudden you have very clear documentation on what each step of the process looks like and what they need to do. So that becomes their knowledge base or their company wiki, or there's a million different names that people use for it today, but it's the LMS. It's effectively where all that and then sits, and it allows them really to set them free to achieve all that they would like to. And then parts of that also come into effect where we have like an account manager, where we help no longer really facilitate, but provide sort of the guardrails so that you could be doing things like performance reviews and leave tracking and things that, I'd say like more professional HR business partner companies will be looking to support others in their journey in achieving.
Yes. And what are the type of engagement models that you have? I know you have a few. What are they? Can you please share?
Yeah, so we have 2 models. We have, the really simple one to look at is what would be classified as just a typical recruitment model, where we'll go off, we'll look to find the talent. It's a success-based model. So once we've found the talent and the client or the prospect is happy with it, they'll pay us a one-time fee. They'll own the relationship with that talent. And, should something go wrong in the first 60 days, we will replace them. That's the first model, the really simple one. And that's like that's a very traditional old world model. And one, honestly, that we are trying to move away from, because for us, it's about perpetual value creation. How do we stay aligned and attached on an ongoing basis so that we're actually not just helping someone find great talent, but helping them build their dream reality where, day by day, they're removing themselves from not just like the very tactical executional tasks, but like also a lot of the tasks that, become like middle and senior management style tasks. So in our other model, which we would define as full service, is instead of paying an upfront fee, you'll pay us an ongoing fee. But what that will include is us handling healthcare, payroll, social security, HMO, PhilHealth, 13th month, all the government mandated elements that help you not only attract great talent, but retain it. It's a really valuable lever. What's more is we have a really robust onboarding capabilities, and in that model, again, it's all baked into it. So instead of sort of paying for it a la carte at a premium, we say, right, we want to make sure we get this right. We can also do things like the process documentation and SOPs and help build on that accountability chart, help build the strategic hiring roadmap in saying, how are we going to see you out of being, let's say you're the marketing manager today and you're working on Canva that you probably shouldn't be, as well as doing the content writing and doing the outreach messaging and the partnership and the SEO outreach, all the different functions that you are sort of trying to be the Swiss Army knife. We can say, right, what are the things that are adding the most value? Right, well, media is a big component. Let's bring you in a specialized Meta media buyer or a Google AdWords campaign manager, and we can work with you to achieve that. And so in this model, it's a much higher touch and ongoing solution. And I think the big benefit outside of sort of all these value added things that are baked into it is that if anything should go wrong at any point, so if you fire the person, they don't work out, if they resign, we'll replace them, no questions asked, because for us, it's about building that long-term value and saying, assuming you're still committed to going down the path of talent in the Philippines, obviously, but from our experience, it's such a force multiplier, and it's the only way that we've been able to bootstrap, a relatively low investment in this business to building to, I would say revenues that most of the startups here in Israel dream of.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. I just want to ask you about the other side of your business with Escala, the management consulting. What exactly do you do there, and which companies, fits your services?
So from Escala's standpoint, in that business, what we do is we'll go in and we'll get on a discovery call and we'll define the problem statement. What are we looking to solve for in that business? And, while all businesses are unique and different, there's, a general subset of problems that companies operationally will have. There's not a whole lot of internal cohesion, and, sales isn't talking to marketing, isn't talking to operations, or it's very much founder led and they're working really deeply inside of the business, or you're having issues around visibility and standardizing of performance management, or understanding how to build proper retention levers or career paths, or all the different things. So we'd go through and we'd understand the problems. On the back of that, we would put together a proposal for a project, and assuming that looks good, what we then go is we go into effectively 3 phases. So we go into our first phase, which is our assessment phase, and that typically takes, depending on the size of the company, to come back to part of the question, we have cut our teeth and worked really closely in the e-commerce space at the start of the journey of the business, and that's still our sort of bread and butter, so to speak, and our most common client. But we've worked with SaaS companies, we've worked with a lot of agencies. It's become quite expansive. We're in like some pretty obscure niches now, like in the Painters Association of America. We're working with like home restoration companies. And, at the end of the day, coming back to the point I was making, is that while we can provide like real expert advice in how to restructure companies in the e-commerce space, for a lot of these more sophisticated businesses, just having us bring it all together and give them even lower level guiding, supporting ideas of how they can structure, maybe not having the same level of depth of knowledge, is, can be a paradigm shift in how they see their business and how they can operate. So in phase 1, we assess, we have our maturity analysis framework. We tell you sort of where you fit based on your people, process, and technology, which for us makes a system where you sit on the scale. We'll give you all the current state process maps and all the areas for improvement. We'll make a whole host of recommendations on what your org chart should look like, what your accountability chart should look like, how that all ladders up. And it's a pretty heavy deck, maybe 50 pages, 40 to 50 pages. Assuming we align on all of that, or we take feedback and we make changes, we move into phase 2. Phase 2 is where we actually start to design that future state. So how do we now make this optimal? So with the recommendations we made, what does the process now look like? And what do the process maps look like? And we have sort of these 5 levels of process hierarchy. And then the last phase is the integration phase, where we're actually build out that future state. We'll build out all the standard operating procedures. We'll build it into a training platform like Trainual, or into ClickUp or Monday.com with a company wiki. We'll define every single step-by-step action in the company and connect it back to that wiki, as well as building project management workflow automations to say, for example, I want to launch a new product, start workflow, and all I have to do is assign who's responsible. I have all the step-by-step information, and that's the output. It typically takes, again, I need to get on these discovery calls to understand, but it typically takes about 6 months would be our average project in Scala.
Well, And if I understand you correctly, the focus is on operational transformation, like within the company, processes, tools, teams, right? Around specific pain or specific challenge that has been identified.
It's a nice way of framing it. Operational transformation.
Yes.
I might borrow that from you.
Okay. Please do. Please do. Great. Wow. Amazing. And all of these are like bootstrap businesses. And I like to learn from you. And also, I believe our listeners will be very excited to learn some of your bootstrapping tips and right, what's your style of doing things and your mindset around this way of launching businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share, one of the decisions I had to make when I had helped grow that company from 2 to 5 million and it was acquired, the decision that I was making at the start was a couple of things. One, it was very Amazon centric as a company. That was the major revenue driver.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an incredible platform and an incredible marketplace. But I knew that one, the level of monetary investment that what I would have needed when you also look at the cash conversion cycles of e-commerce businesses was going to be quite substantial, into the hundreds of thousands of dollars with the sort of the product category that I was looking for. And I wasn't, at that point for me, I probably would have had to have taken on debt. So, that was one of the things, is if I could sort of invest around $100,000, I wouldn't have to take on a considerable amount of debt
Mm-hmm.
or go down that path. So that was one consideration. The next aspect of it was that as great as Amazon was and as fast as you can grow a business there, you still have a degree of dependency on the platform and things can shift and change. And I was concerned that I would look to build a business that market conditions might change. And, we're seeing a lot how challenging it is in the e-commerce space in general, this margin compression that's happening. So that was also one of the deliberations that I made. And I would say at the early stages of MultiplyMii, I looked at the unit economics of a business like this and understood that even with margin built into us finding this talent and working through it, it's still going to be so lucrative for the clients that they are going to move from paying someone, let's call it $8,000 a month to, $1,000 or $2,000 a month, even with our fees baked in. And so if I can save someone, if I can save someone 80%, 60 to 80% on their staffing costs, that's a massive win for them.
Sure.
And if we can make enough margin on that, where if we do it at the volume that we're doing it at, then it's a real win-win. And so that was sort of the decisions. I would say like a lot of young entrepreneurs or, younger entrepreneurs. I'm now in my late 30s. And when, I was starting this, I was in my early 30s and I thought I could take everything on. So, a year into MultiplyMii, we're like, this is going great. And sort of said, let's launch Escala. And so we launched the process improvement. And, this is also the time, I think you touched on it really early on in the conversation, but money was free. All the e-commerce aggregators were literally borrowing at 0% interest rates.
Yeah.
Like you could stand up a debt facility, hundreds of millions of dollars. Like it was crazy. They were just throwing money at everything that moved. And about $17 billion of venture capital and debt was raised just in that space alone. So, we were doing good work, but everyone had money to invest and the e-commerce space was really, really thriving. So, it was like we couldn't do anything wrong. Like the business kept growing and then that business kept growing. And then we built a joint venture, which we didn't talk about here, with an investment bank and a fintech. They gave us $50 million from a facility to invest in e-commerce businesses, to grow them, to exit. And, what had happened is, we have a couple of investments still operating today, but I would say me personally, but us as a business, we lost focus. It's very hard when we were, particularly at the time, quite founder-led, to be working on multiple sales, functions, and trying to bring in a project here and talent there and investments here. And so what I had learned, we also had a team of 15, like one of the reductions in size is we had a team of 15 building technology internally as well. So we effectively had like 4 businesses running concurrently in 3 or 4 years. And so coming back to it, we were growing, but we were growing not in a hockey stick graph reality that everyone dreams of, but we were sort of growing everywhere, but we weren't profitable. We were just sitting at break even in that entirety. And so I would say like this year for me has been, let's say a year of maturation and realizing that less is more, as much as everyone tells you that. It's very hard.
Pick your battles, right?
Battles and reduce your focus and be really, really good at a few things. I'd say I feel that at a personal level, but at a business level, the same is to be true. So I'd say like coming back to the bootstrapping nature of it, I think that leveraging the Philippines was sort of the gateway to being able to achieve this. But then what's more is like now that we have created consolidated focus, we're really seeing, we're finally, 5 years in, starting to see a business that has like real legs and has some serious viability. And if we can continue to bring in more profitable dollars and reinvest it into bringing in higher level talent and starting to build even more intentionally on those ratios of bringing more senior leaders into the company, then I can see that eventual hockey stick experience happening. And I would say that's some of the learnings I've had from a bootstrap perspective. And the really interesting thing that doesn't keep me up at night, so to speak, but I would say that this is one of the value propositions of being like venture backed or PE backed or wherever you're getting your capital from. Is I remember thinking throughout the journey, like, man, we never would have built a Scala if like we were venture backed, because they wouldn't have let us do that. But like we got to do this. And then it's like, well, then we did Southcon. I'm like, see, we wouldn't have been able to do this. But you realize that these companies have loads of experience, and the reason why they don't let you do these things is because it's a distraction. And so having an adult in the room or being beholden to some relationship like that probably would have shortened our experience. And so I see a lot of value in it. It's just about what level of control are you prepared to give up. And I think just picking like the right investor relationship is probably so critical as it relates to that.
Interesting. So just pick your battles, focus on the right business units that you feel more comfortable with, and just zero in. And you show the world your commitment for the topic, right? And there is more tendency to work with you, obviously, when you're totally focused on that and your roadmap are aligned. And that's
absolutely.
These are great tips. So, Yoni, I usually ask my guests about work-life balance and what are the things that they do outside of work. I don't know how much time you have outside of work, but I'd love to learn from you. How do you relax? How do you unwind? What do you do outside of business?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely changed throughout the journey. I would say, like, we didn't take salaries for the first year of the business, and living in Tel Aviv, that's a very challenging thing. That's a very challenging thing to do. I moved in with my then girlfriend, now wife, and she had a housemate, and I was renting out my place. Like, you just have to sort of make these things work. But coming back to it, my work-life balance has gotten better through necessity. I've got 2 small kids now, so you have to be there to support. So it's definitely better. Today's not a good day. I'm trying to hit the Pacific time zone, and that's pretty shitty with us. But outside of work, I'm in the gym 3 days a week. I'm walking, probably 15,000 steps a day. I hobbyist DJ. I still get to hang out with my friends.
Nice.
I'm also fortunate that my work gets to take me around the world. So I get to speak at events and go to conferences, and I definitely enjoy the places that I get to experience. So yeah, I'd say a relatively healthy work-life balance, but hopefully next year will be even better.
Yes, anything that involves kids is always good, for me. So that's
definitely
great. So Yoni, I mean, how people can find you and the companies?
Yeah, so you can find, I mean, if you're looking at like specifically our services, if you just go to weareescala.com or MultiplyMii, spelled with a me is MII.com, then you can easily find where to sort of operate or work with us. If you want to find me personally, Yoni Kosminski on LinkedIn, I'm relatively active there, or Yoni at either of those emails will get you to me.
Nice. And Yoni, final tips for businesses or brands out there?
final tips. I mean, just to draw on what I was saying before,
Yeah.
it's all about focus and, like you said, picking your battles. So while your ideas may change over the course of time and your business will evolve, don't, if I could give my younger self some advice, it's just stick the course, build a really great, profitable business that's focused, and then start to explore what's next and what's next. But only once you're there should you start to sort of look left and right, because that shiny object syndrome will ultimately, cost you,
Yeah.
a lot. At least that's been my experience.
And probably when you're in that stage, this is the right time to call MultiplyMii for some help on execution and growth, right?
100%.
Okay, Yoni, it's really a pleasure. Really appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. It was great.
Bye-bye.